Sean,
Yep.
if I were to characterize this correctly, I guess the problem you're addressing is there's very compute-intensive applications out there, and they're hitting their max headroom on general-purpose processors.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've discovered that there's ample opportunity to leverage the GPU, the graphic processors, to run these applications.
Right.
Which sounds interesting. Now, is it just purely limited to MATLAB, or do you plan on being able to run other types of applications on this, or how does that work in terms of expanding beyond the 4 million MATLAB users?
Okay, great.
So, is this on?
Yeah.
Good. So, our current plan, so stage one, is to support MATLAB users. And so, everyone who uses this very nice interpreted environment can go through and run things very quickly. Our key philosophy as a company is that scientists should be using MATLAB for their work. And actually, if you go out and look, they do. But the big problem with this is that you can write MATLAB code for MATLAB, but you can't really get it into an application. So what people typically do is they write something in MATLAB and prototype it, and then they port it to C or C++, which ends up in the final application. Our overall goal for the company is to be able to allow people to use MATLAB to write for the GPU here inside the interpreted environment, and we want to provide a compiler so that you can build MATLAB code and then get it directly into your application. So our overall vision is to be able to enable GPUs for MATLAB users first, but then afterwards enable it for all programmers through the use of the MATLAB language. So we hit the full market. We also believe that MATLAB, since it's a parallel language, is unique in that it is very, very well suited for GPU programming. A lot of the thought processes that you have to go through to be able to program in MATLAB are actually the same sort of thought processes that you need to be able to code for the GPU in the first place. So instead of now taking C programmers and teaching them a new paradigm, you'd say, hey, learn MATLAB. It's easy to do. You can do it in this interpreted environment, and now you can just code for the GPU now because you already know the paradigms and everything that you need to program for parallel architecture.
And I should mention C and C++ are theoretically unable to compile down to a GPU. They just don't have it's a language that doesn't have words of parallelism. So that it's not an option.
Yes, Kevin? Yes, so you're going with a perpetual license model.
Yep.
How did you decide to do that versus a subscription-based model? That's one question. The second question is, when I see your marketing or channel partners on there, they appear to be geographic-based. Why did you choose geographic-based versus vertical-based partners? Because it looks like your end-user applications are vertical in nature.
So to answer the first question, we are considering a software as a service model, but that is related more to our as the number of GPUs grow. So as the first stage, we are basically right now selling standalone licenses, and people are coming in, buying in an experiment, mostly from these impressive customers that John listed. One or two guys from who are really taking the lead from their organization, they come and experiment with the technology, and now we are starting to see the number of orders to gradually increase. So as the software as a service model basically makes sense for us, we have plans to incorporate that. Probably with our future like network-based licensing, that may be an option. And your second question was, why did we choose resellers instead of going vertical?
No, the question was, you chose marketing partnerships, resellers, channel partners that are geographically based versus vertically based. And if I understood what you were saying earlier, looks like your end user applications are vertical in nature. So I just wondered why you chose geographic versus vertical.
Yeah. So it's amazing. First of all, that we have over a dozen resellers. A small team of 10 does not land that by themselves. So what happened was NVIDIA introduced us to everyone that was carrying NVIDIA GPUs, and so they said let's co-market this. So now these vendors are selling hardware coupled with software. And as we landed, half a dozen of these guys, then other resellers started taking notice, people that are selling just MATLAB and not hardware, and so then it exploded from there. And it just happened that these guys were geographic. Yeah, yeah, right.
So what I want to open up, I want to find out what valuation you're going to give us on that award money. But seriously, I guess if you could speak just briefly about your customer acquisition strategy. Is it purely all channel, or is there some direct components to that?
Okay, so right now our current incarnation of the product is directly tied to MATLAB. So it's easy to just go in and find in all the vertical industries who are the MATLAB users and target those. So that's what we've been doing, and actually we've worked a lot with the MathWorks as they have they have millions of customers. As they have people interested in GPUs, they refer them directly to us. So we work a lot off of their referrals, and that sort of spreads to some degree virally. Also, NVIDIA likewise they have hundreds of salesmen out there who are trained to talk about Jacket because they really don't have much else that supports these GPUs right now. So these guys are just proselyting us all over the place. It's been great. But in terms of so we select defense, healthcare. Those are the main markets, and we go after the MATLAB customers in those markets. Yeah.
Spinning off that question, you inferred that you have, for a long period of time, provided free software to people, and you're trying to convert them. Can you amplify that a little bit? How many users do you have out there, and what's your conversion rate to date?
Right. So we have thousands of users, and those are users that started in June of 2008, went 7 months in our beta, and then since in the 4 months since, we've more than doubled the number of users, the people that have come and trialed our software. What we're noticing is that so we have thousands of customers, yet we've only sold a little over 100 licenses. Our problem here is that we have great software, but it's not got enough features. So MATLAB has been around for 25 years, has 10,000 functions. Our product's been around 4 months and has a limited subset of that. The most important ones, it does FFT and arithmetic on matrices and some matrix algebra and stuff. But maybe a finance guy says, I need a Black-Scholes simulation, and you don't have that. So we simply need to expand our suite of functions that we offer to our customers to get better conversion on those people. So that's basically what's happening there is we know exactly which functions our customers want. We've done extensive surveying of them and sitting down with them and looking at their code, and we understand what they need. I mentioned the 3 sort of major releases that we think will bump us up next year and what features those are. But there's a whole lot of development effort that still needs to go into it. Yeah.
And one follow-up. If I understand it correctly, MATLAB, is that a MathWorks compiler, or? It's
the MathWorks flagship product. It's sort of an application and a programming language by which.
So why won't they just do exactly what you do and put you out of business?
Oh, very good question. So first of all, they could do what our current incarnation of the product is. They wouldn't do it in the next 2 years simply because they move very, very slowly. Their business is built on conservative stability, and if you look at release cycle over release cycle, there's very little change because they go through so much testing and iteration, and GPUs are just too new. That said, at some point, this market will grow to the point where they can't ignore it. But by that point, the things that Gallagher mentioned are MATLAB compiler, which will take MATLAB as a language and detach it from MATLAB the application. That's where we will see sort of our independence and ability to sort of mitigate that risk going forward. So we're already working on that. That's something we'll have in the next year or so, and then we'll be clear of that risk. But yeah, we're not worried about the risk simply because of time frame and because of our vision.
You talk about a pretty large market, I guess. As you look at the competitors today, how much revenue is generated today in your guesstimate to really look at the size of the market today from an actual revenue dollars versus what's projected, and who is the largest competitor on the list from a revenue perspective?
How much revenue is generated for visual computing market in general, or I didn't understand?
Mostly geared towards the market you're going after, so comparable revenue dollars. So
we're the only people selling a product right now that runs MATLAB on a GPU. There are other guys that are sort of coming up behind us. In general, So if you look at the four vendors I talked about, IBM, Intel, AMD, and NVIDIA, really NVIDIA is the only one that's really got their product out there right now. The other guys are either missing software components or Larrabee from Intel is still not on the market. Once I think Intel's Larrabee hits the market, then you'll see all sorts of people listening and moving in this direction. So revenue is just, you can't base anything off of it right now. It's really too early.
Just a couple of questions about your patents and the applications and so on. Can you say, first question is, can you say where you are? Have you gotten a first office action yet on your patent applications?
No, these are all been submitted. They're either in the pipeline being submitted in preliminary or provisional stage, or they are just barely submitted and haven't had office actions yet. Yeah.
Okay. And then the second question is, you say exclusive founder rights to patents. Does that mean the company does not, that are not licensed to the company?
No, that refers to the fact that we were all at Georgia Tech as researchers, so we have
so
an agreement with Georgia Tech. Yeah.
Got it. And then the last question, again, around competition is, you mentioned a high barrier to entry. Is that specifically technical, or is there something else? I mean, is it that you got to have 4 really bright PhDs to go do this stuff? Is that what you're suggesting?
So in the first sort of stage of it, it was definitely technical, right? It's very tough to put this together from a technical point of view. That said, you could do it, but as we grow, as our relationships with the MathWorks and with NVIDIA and with Intel and with AMD, as these relationships mature, and sort of we are getting ingrained in their sales cycle and in their channels, then we start seeing other barriers to entry, and that's really, we're focused on really sort of getting it into as many hands of the bigger companies as we can.
Just to Roger's question, what type of penetration rate are you all assuming when you have your revenue projections for 2011 and 2012? What market share are you all getting?
That's really tough because the sort of market's emerging as we're emerging. So right now we're 100% of what we do, right? At some point we won't. At some point our competitors will start selling into our space and the market will continue to grow.
The estimate is around 10 to 15% of the estimated 300 million market for the developers.
Okay. And you mentioned Intel and their emerging product. Sorry, did you say that they were designing and building their own compiler, or are they going to rely on somebody else, or is that market going to be available to you?
So all of these hardware vendors are going to build low-level tools. So for instance, we use right now NVIDIA's low-level tool to be able to run our stuff, but that's not stuff the general public will be using for their applications. They'll be using sort of higher-level tools to do that. So Intel will release low-level tools. It's called CT. We're already working with CT developers to integrate our product on top of their technology. So that's how it works.
And when's the expected release of the Intel product?
It keeps changing, but it's now
it's a mystery.
Q1 2010.
Okay. It just seems it seems interesting that there's not a more well-established competitor for an Intel product that's emerging in that type of a time frame. Am I missing something, or is it still a pretty greenfield?
So I don't know what you mean. There is a competitor to Larrabee. So they're not going to sell their software. That they just give away because they want to sell hardware.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's doing exactly what you're doing as far as utilizing the GPU
No. There's a big difference between sort of assembly level tools that they release and high level tools that we release. It's a big difference. It's not the same.
I guess I just mean that Intel is not already partnering somebody or has somebody lined up in a similar fashion to what you're doing with NVIDIA, that they're relying on somebody to step in and fill the market to utilize their GPU product line.
So the thing is, with our current product, we already have a head start on other people with similar projects. Yeah. So we are in the partnership with Intel on their CT and Larrabee product line. So we are going to be one of the few early on adopters of the technology. Yeah. So we feel that we'll have an advantage because of our background with this technology in building better solutions for their technology.
They want us to do it, yeah.
But MathWorks and similar other people would definitely be on that product early on as well.
Question about the two stages that you have. You have the developer ecosystem and the end user applications. Just so we're clear, are you going into competition in stage 2 with the developer ecosystem? Are those developers working internal for companies like Raytheon?
So it's really going to be a matter of how do we capitalize, once they're using our tools to deploy to their applications, how do we, capitalize that value add that we're providing to them. And so that's one aspect, and we'll work alongside them to build sort of low-level libraries that address particular niche applications. That's sort of what we refer to by this. And also the embedded software market is really where that takes off, because that means now you can take these GPUs and deploy them in UAVs or in some healthcare device. And that step, getting it compiled to be detached from a PC, is a tool that we will provide to address that end user market.
So just so we're clear, the market is still the developers. You're building features such as the Black-Scholes for finance that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, but they're now optimized features for particular verticals. Yeah.
One quick question on customers and basically what it takes to get them to use it. So let's say they spend 200 hours developing some finite element analysis on MATLAB. How many hours will it take them to get it to work on your system?
Right. So, go ahead, Gallagher.
Okay. So, in the end, in the perfect world, you'd expect, very small amounts of time, so, 5 minutes or do a search and replace. Singles to G singles. This is a very quick conversion. And at that point, I believe you can call what we have the killer app for what people are looking for. I guess as we're talking about this other question about customer conversion, we don't have enough features yet. This is, as we add features, we're going to be nearing that point where people can just do search and replace and have their stuff work. And so I guess right now it takes some work to get, depending on the application, to get it to go, say like an hour or 2 hours. But in the end, we want it to be a drop-in, just sort of tool. And we think we can hit that killer application sort of critical mass.
So that's one aspect of it. How do you take existing code and move it into something that runs on a GPU? That's what he addressed. To your point, if you're just starting from scratch and it takes you 200 hours to do a CPU-based solution, it's going to take you still close to the same amount of time because you're still writing MATLAB code. But where you'll find the productivity increase is that when you're running these simulations to sort of test your stuff out, they'll run faster and orders of magnitude faster, so you can iterate on the refinement of the code much faster.
Okay, so right now you're expecting people to develop on your platform, but you're also going to build a compiler to take existing code and move it over, or?
So let me just give a small overview. That the paradigm is very simple. So what we have done, we have not introduced a new API that the end user has to learn. It's just a new data type, and once they have their data in that data type, any operation that they do in MATLAB automatically gets computed on the GPU. So they don't have to do anything. The time that Gallagher and John are pointing out is in order to get maximum optimization, you can organize your MATLAB code in a certain way which is best suited for computing on GPU. So they can tweak their code, spend the extra hours to get the maximally optimized. But the translation is very simple, and they can in fact reuse a large portion of their code without any changes. It doesn't even require any change in the existing MATLAB code because it's all contextual to the data. The Jacket engine takes care of all the memory transfer and kernel generation in the background, so the user doesn't have to do anything. That's been the killer app paradigm that we basically we started off with to really make it very easy. And in spirit with the MATLAB ease of use, that's the paradigm. So if you have a finite element code in a certain way, it's going to take minimal amount of effort to change to our code.
Got about a minute left. One more question, perhaps? Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm getting what you're saying right as it relates to your revenue opportunity. So if I'm hearing this correctly, the pace at which you can sell is going to be gated by two factors. It sounds like the release of GPUs by the four vendors and then the adoption cycle, end user adoption cycle of their hardware, as well as your ability to broaden out the features, the MATLAB feature set that you need to go through to broaden out customer usage on those GPUs.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Yep.
So then the real question here in terms of success for you guys on a revenue basis is how fast both of those things progress.
That's right.
Is that right?
That's exactly right. And we know this is a rising ship that's not going to be stopped, given the force of technologies that are being put into place. It's just a matter of how fast this market emerges. It's going to impact everybody involved in visual computing will be impacted by that speed.
AccelerEyes and the team, thank you very much.
Thank you.
John?